Welcome dear students, we are on the CEC Gurukul lecture. We are discussing the topic switches, that is very important component in the electronic circuit. To complete the electronic circuit we use the switches. So switches are used to control the flow or stop the flow of current in the circuit. So it is very important component in the circuit. We discuss the various types of the switches. Up to now we have discussed the SP, ST, SPDT, single pole, single throw, single pole, double throw switches. Now we move on the next type of the switches, that is the double pole single throw. Double pole switches is basically two SPST, single pole and single throw switches in one package, or we can say that we can operate it by using a single lever. So double pole and the single throw, this switches is mostly used where both ground and the line need to be broken or the close. So at the same time, at the same as the operation of the two pole breaker, and in short it has the two poles, that is it can control two circuit, hot and neutral, and a single throw. So it can only make one operation, that is on or off. So now you see on the screen that this is a double pole single throw, and this double pole single throw switch is you see double pole, and at a time it will connect with the single throw. So double pole single throw switches has 4 terminal pins, that is it is having a 2 input pins and 2 output pins, 2 as input and the rest and 2 as the output pins. DPST switches are used to control a single circuit while both the contacts are needed to be actuated. It means actuated, we can use the double pole single throw. For example, we can easily understand through this example that DPST switches is used to break both the line and the neutral wire for the on and off operation of the connected devices to it. Both the connects are open in case of off position, while both the contacts are closed in case of on position. In simple words, it's either switches on or off the two circuits at the same time. So working operation of a double pole single throw switch is rated for the 122 to 277 volt, which makes or open both the contacts via the single operation as follows. Now you see here on the screen that this you can understand that in the yellow diagram you see that is a schematic diagram. Here the two connection in the left hand side, you see the two connections are closed, but here at the same time two connections are open, that will be on and off. That why it is called a double pole and single throw. Now next type of switches, 2PMT. 2P means two poles and the six throws, and two poles and multiple throws. 2PMT, MT for multiple throws, 2P for the two poles, 2P60, 2P for the two poles, and 60 are the six throw. So DPMT, that is the double pole multiple throw, that is the double pole multiple throw, and 2P60 abbreviated as the two pole multi throw switches. So these kind of switches consist of two poles and multiple throws, and they can be used to control the two independent circuits. We can connect the two independent circuit by using the 2PMT. So these type of switches with a common lever are used as the changeover and the selector switches for the multi-way switches. So you see on the screen here that this is the multiple throws we are using and the two poles we are using here. So in the blue diagram you see that right hand side we are having a number of throws and left hand side we are having a two poles. So other related switches are 2P40, which is used to two different circuits, with while the rest can be controlled and connected to the 2P empty switches, and that is characterized by the rotary and the sector switches. These are the double pole multiple throws switches are characterized into two types. First is the rotary, second is the selector switches. What are the rotary and the selector switches? Selector switches are the rotary switches with a knob which rotates around its axis and switches and connects the common terminal to make too many of the output terminals. As we see in our laboratories, sometimes we adjust the voltage then at the 2 volt, the 3 volt, 4 volt, 5 volt and so on. In this case we use the rotary switches. That switches rotate the anti-clockwise, and we clockwise to increase the current and the left hand side and the anti-clockwise. That is also a selector switches. That's why the selector switches are the rotary switches. When we select a particular value in the electronic circuit, then we use the selector switches. That you always seen in your laboratories. When we adjust the current, when we adjust the voltage, there we use the rotary and the selector switches. So selector switches are the rotary switches with a knob which rotates around this axis, and the switches and the connects the common terminal to make the output terminal. And it is the same as the knob switch in the digital or the analog multimeters. As you see, multimeter, the switch also in the multimeter is the rotary switch. So on the working principle of the demultiplexer, electrical measurement tools and metering, radio bands. In radio bands we also select the one tune. There we use the rotary switches, and radio band selector, channel selector in a communication system where we use the rotary and the selector switches. A rotary switches may have the multiple poles, right? You see on the right hand side on the screen on the diagram that here the arrow is representing and it is moving clockwise. It means we are having a multiple poles here. Rotary switches may have multiple poles and throws for different circuits. Like it depends upon what our requirement. So you see in the diagram that this knob we can rotate clockwise or anti-clockwise. The selector switches are available in the different ranges like 1P 12-way, 2P 6-way. 1P means 1 pole and 12 throws. 2P means 2 poles and 6 ways, 6 throws. 3P 4 ways, 3 poles we use, and the 4 throws we use. 4P 3 ways, etc. As per requirement, the switches are designed. So it has multiple moving and saturatory connections where the rotating knob is used to divert the switches operation of the switches from the one to another. And next is the intermediate switches. Intermediate switch is also known as the four-way switches, and it has the 4 terminals which are used to divert the flow of current from the one position to the another position. It means it has a 4 terminals. The switches are used to control a single appliances such as the light bulb point from different location. For example, to control the light bulb from two different locations and simply a staircases wiring configuration. You see on the screen that these are the four-way switches, and these four-way switches, as per requirement, we connect these switches. You see on the screen that intermediate switches, we can see the position A. We connect the 1 and 4 and 2 and 3 cross connection changeover switches, and second is the position B, where we connect the 1 to 2 and 3 to 4. And intermediate switches is also called as a changeover or a crossover switches. So intermediate switches, its construction and working and its application, you see on the screen here that these are the changeover or the crossover switches. Upper side, you see that the circuit is connected through the cross, and in the lower diagram we see that it is a parallel connected. So next switches is the toggle switches. That is also called one type of the latched switches, and these which are actuated by a lever angle in one or another direction. It means as a lever work, and this toggle switches also work, like we tap it and we remove it. We see in the electronic circuits, and we also use in the laboratories when we connect it. This switch is stable in state and remains in the state until the lever is pushed in another direction. So most of the household appliances such as the lighting control switches have the toggle switches, and it can fall into any category as mentioned. Any type of toggle switches can be prepared. That will be the SPST, DP-DT, DPST, DP-DT. Now you see here on the screen, these are the toggle switches. As we keep it on the right hand side or left hand side, sometimes we have one and on and off, sometimes we have rotation type on and off. So they are available for the high current applications up to the 30 plus amperes, and can be used for the small current switching operations. The rating, shape and design may vary depending on the circuit requirements and its applications. Next is the slide switch. As the name shows, a slide switch uses a slider or as the actuator which slides back and forth position and to make the break and break the contacts. You see on the screen, you are seeing that there is a knob that can be moved, that will push one side to open it and push another side to close it. The following figure is of the single pole and double throw slide. So sometimes you see that this throw 1, 2, 3, this slide switch will be used for controlling the double or 3 throws, which is used to control the flow of current in the circuit. It is used to control on and off operation of the circuit, while the other versions, that is the double pole and throws extra, are used to divert the current flow from one direction to the another direction and controlling many functions in the switching operation. Push button switches. Next type is the push button switches. As you see on the screen that this is the push button. We push the button and the connection will complete, and then we will use it. The symbol is given below. As the name suggests, the push button are momentary switches which are operated by pressing, put the pressure by pushing and it for a while. The spring mechanism for the actuator inside it is used to close and open the circuit for on and off operation. As you see, an O open circuit, and the lower schematic diagram is different, representing as A and C, that is the closed circuit, and the symbol of the circuit is round type. When the push button switches is pressed, the movable contacts attached to the button and make sure to connect the static, stationary or the stable. Sometimes contacts in series to make the circuit. When the pressure is released, connects of the pins are detached and the circuit operation returns back to its first position, either on and off. So they are generally NON and NC, or the double acting, which is used to control two different circuits. So for example, push button switches, as in the drills we use push and blowers, and doorbells we use the push button switches. And push button switches are generally NON NC, or double acting, or that work on the momentary action. Next type of switches is the limit switches, and this limit switches is operated automatically by mechanical parts of the machine, or manually by an object in control systems, like the bumper arm in the switch is used as a actuator, and when pressed or come in contact with the object, it changes the direction of flowing of the current, hence it changes the position and the operation of the circuit. You see on the screen that this type of the limit switches that will be used to connect and on and off. On the upper side you see NC is connected, and NO, it is a open circuit, and the lower side is also normally open, and that is the normally closed. That are the limit button. And some example of the limit switches are the push button limit switches, which are actually by the motion of the mechanical part of the machines or the other object. Sometimes it may be momentary. The another example of the push button double pole limit switch, with the two poles, which is used to control the two separate circuits, like it breaks the one circuit and close to the another circuit. Next type of switches is the flow switches. What are the flow switches? Flow switches are used to detect and control the flow of air or the movement of a liquid, such as the water and the oil. In the connected ducts and the pipes, we use flow switches. And when the air and the liquid flows above the limits in the metal or the plastic pipes, the snap action by spring mechanism moves the metal arm of the micro switches, which leads to the makes the break the contacts, hence the operation of the system changes. Like flow switches are used to detect and control the flow of air and the movement of the liquid in a pipe and in a ducts. So this type of circuit you see here on the screen. The flow switches can be both normally closed and normally open, which are used to control the air flow or the liquid movement in the pipe ducts and the trunks and extra. You see here that it is connected through the normally open and connected to the pole and throws. That type of switches are used to flow the liquids or the air. Next type of switches is the float switches. As the name indicates, the float switches is the floating switches that controls a circuit or a machine inside a tank full of the liquid, and it detects the level of the liquid. The switches will on and off when the liquid level rises and falls according to the requirement. And most of the water tanks use this type of switches, and they will alarmed so that the flow of water can be saved. So the float switches controls the circuit or a machine inside the tank full of the liquid. So the example, when the level of the water falls below the design line, the contact arms and the rod makes the contacts which trigger the circuit, hence the motor pump AC and DC motors is activated and the water tank again starts to fill the liquid. Moreover, we control it. Like see on the screen that these are this type of the float switches. And similarly, when the water tank is full, the lever disconnects the terminal contacts and the motor pumps automatically switch off. The whole process is automatic and simultaneously with the help of using a float switches. Next type of switches is the pressure switches. Pressure switches are used to sense and operate by the air or the gas under the pressure in the industrial applications. The different type of such as metal blow and piston type diaphragm operated pressure switches are widely used in the hydraulic systems. Moreover, where we just adjust the pressure on the system, we use this type of the pressure switches, and that is measure the range of level of the pressure, and that will indicate that there is a leak of gases, or sometimes we require that is requirement of the filling of a gases. So on the basis of the requirement, we use this type of the pressure switches. The single pole or the double pole pressure switches are operated by the pressure detection elements which trigger the conductor to open or close changes in the position of the system. You see on the screen that these are the pressure switches to flow of the gases or to control the flow of the gases. Next type of switches, mechanical switches we are discussing, and the next type of is the joystick switches. As you all listen this name joystick, that will used in the computer gaming. We use the joystick. So joystick is also called the flight stick or the hat switch, and that type of switches uses the lever connected to it, and the lever freely moves where the direction movement connects the different terminals of the switches to control the circuit. So the switch contacts can be actuated by moving the stick in the right, left, upper and lower positions. So they are mainly used in gaming, controller pads, building machinery, portable controls, equipments, camera, motion control, trucks, elevators and other industrial applications. We use this type of the joysticks, like JCB, cranes, we use this type of the joystick switches. Next type of switches are the temperature and the thermal switches. What are the temperature and thermal switches? Thermal and temperature switches depend on the temperature where the heat sensing element such as bimetallic strips is bent by the thermal expansion. That is when they exposed to the heat. For example, when the temperature rises and crosses the preset level, the bimetallic strips expands and breaks the contact and the circuit is open. So temperature and thermal controlling switches depends upon the temperature where the heat sensing elements is bent by the thermal expansion. You see on the screen here that when the temperature is reduced below the level, the biometallic strips shrinks and returns to the normal position, and which leads to making the contacts. Thus the contacts are connected to close the circuit. You see here that circuit will be connected. On the upper side you see left hand side is open circuit, right hand side is a connected circuit. These are the temperature and thermal switches. Example of the temperature and thermal switch: NC thermal switch and NO thermal switch, mercury glass tube and the thermal relays etc., which is used for overload protection of the electrical machines. Next type of switches is the timer switch. Timer, both digital and analog timer switches, and that the switches are known as the timer, and these are used for time delay for specific applications. A time switch can be configured using the mechanical timer clock work, where it makes the break and contact when the setup time runs out, and hence on and off the connected circuit from the supply. Means this timer switches work on the digital as well as the normal timer switches, and it is used to detect the time delay for the specific application. A time switch can be configured using the mechanical time clockwork, where it makes or breaks the contact. Timer switches with the help of contactor and relays are used in power circuits. Water heater timer, central heater control, and vehicle sleep timer, and TV set extra. You will see in the remotes we use sometimes the timer switches which operate on timing mechanism. You see on the screen here, this is the mechanically, you see that here we are having a different type of the timer switches. Next is the next series. In the next series, we will discuss about the electrical and electronic circuit switches. Up to now, we have discussed the many mechanical switches, and these mechanical switches we use in the daily life. Some operate on the push button, some operate on the forces, and some work on the momentary for a particular time being. Some work upon the as a pressure will be given to the buttons, and some depends upon the on and off system. So up to now we discussed the basic mechanical switches that are used in daily life, that are used to complete the electronic circuit. Thank you very much.